Is there a better way to start the new year than making the first episode of the new year a finish-up of unused material from an episode from last year? Yes, probably literally anything, but that's what we're doing anyway because the sunk cost fallacy feels like much less of a fallacy when you're spending your own money and your own time, and those are basically the same thing in the nightmarishly stupid career you've trapped yourself in as your own irresponsible boss. Anyway. Remember 3 fucking months ago we ran an episode about other YouTubers being dumb assholes online about the new Ninja Turtles movie pretending to misread a comedy plot twist on purpose so they could generate fake controversy by claiming that this version turned Master Splinter gay to get hate click traffic off of it? Yes, no, well, not only was that a real thing, but originally the reason I ended up running a whole show about what ended up being a very minor thing that mercifully petered out quick because the movie was really good and a decent sleeper hit but not big enough to deal in any direction to get the kind of eyeballs these guys wanted off of it, proving again that they're just making shit up based on what they can find to hate that's popular to generate revenue, not really getting revved up about things they're passionate about, which, I don't know, to me that makes it worse, honestly, but I digress.
Stay on target. We're too close. Stay on target.
Originally, my episode wasn't going to be about just that. As written and recorded, it was going to be a two-topic, one thing and another thing, comparison deal with that fake trumped-up rage bait bullshit and what at the time was an even stupider, bigger, louder, much more in the zeitgeist fake rage bait bullshit coming from most of the same dumb assholes about the then most recent Star Wars TV show, Ahsoka, which was at that point still in the middle of its run and weird nerds were mad online about it because, I mean, we'll get to that, but you probably already know why. Female. So midway through editing that episode, peek behind the curtain time here, 2 things became immediately clear to me. First, the episode is too long because the merge point in the narrative of what I'm trying to say where it ties the two together and became more prominently about the Star Wars stuff was taking too long to get to, but there also wasn't enough Ninja Turtle stuff I could cut, so I should probably just cut all the Star Wars stuff into one section and make it either a 2-parter or just make it a fully separated episode in its own right. And 2, with Ahsoka still airing weekly new episodes at that time, there was either going to keep being more to say about this popping up in the news cycle, or even if not, however long I took to revisit it, there was all but certainly going to be more Star Wars bullshit, more Disney bullshit, more obnoxious fanboy bullshit, and just more bullshit all around merging together to talk about and add in that would probably make for either a better, more in-depth, richer, and more worthwhile video, or at least a slightly longer video that I could potentially earn a couple more pennies in AdSense revenue off of because Uncle Bob has bills to pay, kids. And boy was I right, because at the time, the dumbest topical thing in Star Wars fandom was, oh hey, yeah, wow, I buried the lead again, huh?
Stay on target.
Yeah, so at the time, the Ahsoka issue was that fanboys were mad at Disney and Lucasfilm no longer taking lightsabers seriously enough, because a lady person got stabbed with one on the space TV show and didn't die right away, and that also happened to another person who was a lady on a previous space TV show who also didn't die right away. No, yeah, that was it.
What?
In pursuit of reasons to be mad at women, they've opted to now become concerned about the non-existent physics and inconsistent lethality of the emotion-colored laser sword. But since then, the fandom is still mad about that stuff and other stuff that was already in motion, like Daisy Ridley coming back for the Rey movie, Taika Waititi still maybe doing a movie of his own, Kathleen Kennedy continuing to exist as both a person and the head of Lucasfilm. They hired a woman of Pakistani descent to direct that Rey movie, and someone found a quote of her saying she enjoyed making men uncomfortable. And then right around Christmas time, Paramount Plus basically gave them all a present in the form of a South Park special whining about diversity, which, if we keep the present metaphor going, basically the equivalent of re-gifting a hand-me-down from 2005, because hey, 20 years ago your older brother thought this was the funniest fucking thing ever, so we figured that must still be the case, right?
I am going to show you a film comedy from my youth that won't hold up.
Oh, and also, this idiot had a fucking meltdown because Mark Hamill said he couldn't steal his identity. But we'll circle back to all that in a minute, because here is the Ahsoka, lightsaber, etc. stuff, the live-action and recorded narration parts that I was going to talk about on it originally in that episode when it was first put together. I'm going to chop it down a little bit and put some graphical differentiation up so it's more clear, but otherwise, for posterity, here you go. Meanwhile, we've got, Ahsoka, the new Star Wars show, which is fine so far, as at the time of recording this, it's about halfway through. I think it's fine. Most of the Star Wars shows are fine. Andor was great. I think The Mandalorian is a lot of fun. Most of these are fine. You know, it's B+, like Saturday afternoon syndicated entertainment, but it's on streaming. You know, my general Star Wars opinion is that Star Wars has been great cinema exactly 3 times, and the rest of the times have been good to pretty good adaptations of a line of Kenner action figures that were based on great cinema. So, 6 of one is half dozen of the other. Andor was closer to the great cinema show. Mandalorian and Ahsoka are more action figure shows. They're characters you recognize from Star Wars, going to various play sets. Either Jon Favreau or Dave Filoni or whoever else are, the big imaginary child hands whacking the action figures together and making them fight. That's fine. That's what I'm paying for out of the Star Wars shows. I want to see the toys fight. It's Star Wars. One thing I will say is that Ahsoka and Andor coming out more or less as bookends to Mando Season 3 as the wild opposite extremes of what both Star Wars fans and Star Wars media critics alternately claim they want out of the franchise, as in Ahsoka is a fandom minutia as storytelling, all mythology, MacGuffins, and lore explanations all the time show that's obsessed with all the Star Wars things, whereas Andor is doing that Christopher Nolan Dark Knight thing where it elevates a property into a more serious-minded, supposedly more intellectual exercise by throwing out almost everything about the property and just making a solid drama that occasionally reminds you, oh yeah, this is in Star Wars. And yet both things getting basically the same decent but okay, not really great viewership numbers compared to the Baby Yoda show kinda goes a long way to clarifying, whether you like it or not, the realities of this franchise. As in, despite all the shouting and grousing and hand-wringing either from dumb fucks on YouTube or film and TV critics getting their hopes up, it kinda looks like the math is what the math always looked like on this, as in, what's popular about Star Wars is Star Wars, the stuff from the movies and the toys and all that. So when a Star Wars thing is about lightsabers and Millennium Falcons or recognizable Jedi or guys who sorta look like Boba Fett or Yoda but he's a baby, it's popular, and when it's live-action version of cartoons that not everybody watched or a drawn-out geopolitical allegory in space, starring, the one from Rogue One who wasn't the cool blind guy, the cool gun guy, or not Rey, it's less popular. File that one under duh. Related, I guess Donald Glover's Lando show is now going to be Donald Glover's Lando movie again. That's a much better idea. But apparently people got pissed off about this. I thought, of all of the things that I thought people would get pissed off about, mythology stuff that looks like they're going to do time travel, multiverse stuff, not a fan of that. Feels like that's getting a little played out at this point. No, they're upset because someone got stabbed with a lightsaber and didn't die right away. And apparently that's a problem because, guess why it's a problem. Go on, guess.
Is this a female? It's true. You work with your females, arm them, and force them to wear clothing.
So for full context, in the first episode of Ahsoka, Sabine Wren gets run through with a lightsaber, and then in the next episode, she's basically okay because they got her to the hospital. Same basic thing happened to Reva Savander in the Obi-Wan show, and now people are pissy because if two female characters can live through this, but Qui-Gon Jinn and Han Solo both died from similar wounds, it must mean that the franchise is trying to overcompensate for its women characters, or brainwash men into thinking they're no longer powerful, or whatever the dumb theory is this week, as opposed to, we have specific plans for these characters, or this actor signed for more projects, but this actor did not, because why should something obvious or sensible be the answer? I understand that part of the fun of doing nerd bullshit is taking it too seriously and trying to figure out, the imaginary ways that the fake science bullshit could be made to make sense, but to me, the fun of it was always using the science and the imaginary, hey, here's how mathematically, hypothetically, the warp engines could work or whatever, was always using the real stuff to make the fun, imaginary, fake stuff more plausible, to make more cool stuff, to justify it, basically. I never understood the impulse that said, I'm going to learn everything about physics and research a bunch of stuff in order to prove that Superman can't fly to ruin it for myself. I was always more of the school of, I'm going to find a way through physics and fiction and bending string theory around itself in order to explain that everything that happened in the golden age when Superman was way overpowered actually made more sense because I like that better. That to me, that's the more fun version of this. Now, granted, I'm old as fuck in internet years, and I remember when George Lucas decided that he didn't like blood anymore. So he changed the rules of lightsabers, because back in the original version of the original Star Wars, when we saw the first lightsaber wound, when Ponda Baba's arm gets cut off. There's this big bloody stump on the ground, or when they cut the Tauntaun's belly open and the guts pop out. He hadn't decided that lightsabers cauterize wounds yet, so there was blood or guts or whatever. Later on in the prequels, you know, of course they cauterize wounds, so Darth Maul, no blood, Qui-Gon gets it right through the belly, and it's just a burn hole and whatnot. Which, okay, yeah, makes sense, sure, I guess. Makes about as much sense as the emotion-colored crystals that make a light beam that comes out of a flashlight but only comes up so far and gets held in place by, I guess, a magnetic beam and the Force. The way we used to explain that to ourselves was basically, well, hey, you know, maybe Ponda Baba's people don't have a vascular blood system. Maybe they have, like, a bag muscle blood sort of system, and that's why he bled more than another thing would. Maybe that just... in order to make it more cool. In order to allow the cool stuff to still exist, rather than trying to find a way to make it unfun.
Ah, the whole movie's flawed. Like that lightsaber stuff. They turn it on and it goes yay high. How does it know when to stop?
The Force?
Man, that's your answer for everything.
But no, they're mad because someone in Obi-Wan got stabbed and lived, and it was a woman, and someone in Ahsoka gets stabbed and it's a woman. They see this as, oh, they're making the girls too powerful, that they're empowering women, and that's bad because that means agenda, and that means Kathleen Kennedy is still in charge, and all this horse shit. And aren't you tired? And that's not even a joke. I'm asking sincerely, at least in part for my own health at this point. I do this for a living, and I'm starting to have real difficulty staying genuinely invested in things I actually enjoy and that make me happy for the level of effort it takes. So I don't understand and honestly find it legitimately upsetting when people have the ability to dump so much time and effort into being mad about stuff that just doesn't matter. What did you ever like about any of this when you did to hate it so much now, and why stay invested and angry when you could just do anything else? There are people who don't stay in relationships they don't like, with spouses they don't love, or fuck in religions they don't believe in anymore, for as long as people like this who claim they used to be the world's biggest fans of something like Marvel or DC or Star Wars or video games, whatever, until they got ruined forever because there's a black Spider-Man, or DC didn't restore the Snyderverse, or Star Wars has too many women, or Lara Croft went down a cut size, or whatever, still stick around staying obsessed with them instead of just doing other things. And look, I won't front about this. I've been doing this work long enough that if you go back, you'll probably find instances from years ago where I also acted like a dumb, possessive, creepy asshole nerd about something in pop culture that now makes this sound contradictory because, well, it is. I'm contradicting that because it would have been years ago. I grew up and changed my mind because it's an awful, soul-draining mental state to live in, and I'm tired of it. How can you not be? How can living as the sort of person who gets mad because
Fucking pronouns! Fucking gender ambiguity! Fucking current day Californian
not be an exhausting way to live, especially if your specific complaint involves lightsabers and Millennium Falcons or the Baby Yoda show. And you know, at the point at which you're trying to explain why stuff can't happen in a Space Wizard movie because you're mad at the kind of people that it can happen for, why are you even here? Because all of the same, like, magic, science, justifying stuff, explaining away one thing can explain away another, none of these people are technically human beings from Earth. We don't know what their insides are like. We don't know how their parts are arranged. You ever see that movie Ninja Assassin where, like, two people survive getting ninja'd through the heart because it turns out that they're, like, one of the people that have that, like, 1 in 40 million condition where their heart's on the wrong side of the body, but the guy who stabbed them didn't know that, so they missed. Yeah, that's dumb, but it's plausible, and that movie's set on Earth. This is set in made-up space. We don't know that they don't have a thing there.
You missed my vital organs.
All of them?
This is the same franchise where people get, like, chopped in half and then they just, like, robot them back together. The thing that makes the wounds has a magical crystal inside it that changes color based on, like, the color of your soul, and you're trying to science out whether or not it makes sense who survives a wound from it and who doesn't. And then you think that the people making it are the ones who are not paying attention to realism. The fuck is with you? And we're back. Yeah, so after all that went down, the series finished up, and the fandom was left amusingly frustrated by liking all of the lore and mythology and extended universe, cartoon canon, hey, the boring blue guy is here now stuff that they'd always asked for, but also still trying to be angry about the female and modern politics stuff that is now the only thing that makes them money on YouTube, because pretty much everybody who can make money doing real media has moved on to real media, which is why this platform sucks so much now outside of a handful of legacy creators, unless you're a middle-aged Republican who wants to hear your opinions shouted back at you by angry dumb guys on yet another platform.
Stay on target.
Yeah, so South Park, the They Still Make That of adult animation, put out another dreary, largely unfunny special on Paramount Plus, the They Still Make That of streaming services, ostensibly trying to both sides this very issue in their usual tiresome fashion, but since South Park is, in fact, a culturally irrelevant relic of the Bush era made by a pair of Midwestern Gen X libertarians,
Stay on target.
it mostly amounted to just them airing out old guys mad at pop culture grievances against Kathleen Kennedy, followed by a half-hearted swipe at anti-woke grifters. At the very end,
I'm sorry I was so reckless with the things that you love. It was just lazy. I guess just wailing on woke stuff all the time is pretty lazy too.
Matt Groening is a friend of mine. I have nothing but warm feelings about that show.
What about South Park?
They can go to hell.
so all those guys and this dumb harpy very clearly picked up on the larger South Park is on our side vibe and have been running with it, not that it's some giant surprise one way or the other. Speaking of which, Star Wars Theory, an inexplicably high-traffic tuber who was always a weird whiny douche.
Andor is a great show for everyone who attended film school and wants to eat their cheese with a French hat.
But turned much worse when he jumped into bed with the more explicitly right-wing EFAP, Geeks and Gamers fandom menace orbit.
But now I feel like what Disney has done is they created this version of Star Wars that's become very political.
Dave Filoni likes his strong women.
This is always who he's been. This is not because of some like KK influence or something. Look at Dave Filoni at that women's conference, trashing fans that didn't like Rey.
Now you have like e-girls being like, I'm such a nerd, I'm such a geek. It's like, no, you're an opportunist.
So then Star Wars Theory announced he was going to try and make a fan film correcting the Disney Star Wars take or whatever on Luke Skywalker on behalf of real fans by using an AI deepfake of Mark Hamill, got called out by the actual Mark Hamill for this. Because, no shit, you can't just do that, and decided to make crying online about how nobody likes him as his whole brand now, because they all need a brand. It's very, very deliberate marketing.
I know a lot of you thought my last apology was insincere. You were right. I was lying.
See, which brings us back to another thing that I was originally planning to talk about in that joint Ninja Turtles version of that original episode before it became a whole other thing, and why I held back on making this part of a whole show and then took some time to wait for it to play out more, because I know I've been referencing and covering the whole right-wing YouTube hate traffic grifting scene, the rise and transformation of it, a lot over the last year, between reviews and before the Schlocktober break, to the point where people were tired of hearing about it, so I figured I'd let it cool off since I was confident that the other shoe of this whole thing I've been pretty sure was hanging over it for a while was about to drop, and now it's started to drop all over the place. You see, my Star Wars theory was that even though the conventional wisdom was that this kind of Newsmax for dorks crap was flourishing on YouTube because the platform was in a generational transition, and the actual Prime audience had moved on to TikTok and such. Subscribe to my TikTok, by the way. These guys' kind of numbers couldn't keep going up either, and they were all exactly stupid enough to think they could leverage their shtick into being the new faces of right-wing media, like the drive time talk radio clowns did in the 90s, and lo and behold, this dreary goon is now hanging out with Ben Shapiro, this Beavis on bath salts creep is at CPAC.
They have a memorial to George Floyd.
Oh my gosh! George Floyd Memorial Live! Wait,
look at that.
And just this past week, hey look, here's Fox News doing, God help us, anti-woke Star Wars content.
I'm certainly not going to be the one to pull it up. So just like Captain Marvel, when they try to put these women-first agendas into these action movies, they flop, and this is going to do the same.
Let's try that in a small town. #1 on iTunes. Sound of Freedom earns 100 million. Top Gun breaks Memorial Day weekend record. Modelo Best Bud Light. Ben & Jerry's loses $2 billion. Disney loses $900 million. But best of luck to the feminist director. I'm sure yours will be a hit.
Yeah. That's why I am a Trekkie and not Star Wars.
Are her parents brother and sister? Can you please leave now? Oh, now I get it. She's a moron.
Which is sad as hell for Fox News. I mean, there's actual wars happening, and this is what they're covering on their news network. But also, think about how these dipshits will feel when they realize this very short segment basically just proves how completely worthless they are, not only as people, but in this ridiculous quasi-profession. Because all these sad stabs at what they think is legitimate media crossover going on indicate a thought process, from where I'm standing, of I can leverage my skill set, such as it is, of 11 to 17 minute Star Wars rants on YouTube, into being the next Tucker Carlson or the next Sean Hannity, right? And Nah, guys, turns out you can't, because this segment right here just demonstrates that a handful of Rupert Murdoch's news bunnies can do every one of them's entire career's worth of content, just boil down the essence of every full piece of YouTube stuff you've ever done into one quick filler segment that runs a few minutes for laughs in the daytime. I mean, that's fucking hilarious. It's sad, but it's funny that it happens to them.
You stupid.
Oh, and speaking of, the director they're mad at, that's doing the Rey movie, and they're angry because she said make men uncomfortable. Yeah, as it turns out, that quote was from an unrelated group interview in 2015, and she was specifically talking about her own documentary from that period, which was about confronting slave traffickers in Pakistan who beat up women who'd been enslaved to keep them in line.
I like to make men uncomfortable. I enjoy making men uncomfortable. Not you, just not you.
Point taken.
So she's talking about women beaters doing literal slave whipping, and douchebag nerds mad online about Star Wars shit respond with,
"Oh, me? I resemble that remark."
Guys, I'm just saying, even if I felt that way, I would know to keep it to myself. Because damn. Now there's a bigger web of branching tangential business to all of this, obviously, and for a change I'm not using business as a gentler colloquialism for a big pile of stupid bullshit. I mean like actual business. Corporations, shareholders, stocks, subsidiaries, internal boardroom proxy politics, and the whole what is or is not going on with Disney is actually a pretty fascinating and also totally not what most people think it is, because neither the internet or coddled has-been cartoon producers from the 90s actually understand the business world as well as they think they do. But my actual no bullshit 2024 resolution is to try to keep these episodes focused on point.
Stay on target. We're too close.
So yeah, for now I'll just end it off here, but we will come back to some of that in other stuff. See, there's this whole quote everyone uses about the movie industry that almost no one uses correctly, and I'm probably going to use it partially incorrectly here, but it fits. So anyway, it's from the screenwriter William Goldman, one of the best who ever worked, specifically his autobiography, where he famously summarized the consistent state of the business side of filmmaking as, nobody knows anything. And yeah, if this is the first time you've heard it and you can immediately tell why even the people he's saying that about love to quote it, it's a perfect line from a guy who wrote a lot of perfect lines. Now, the longer passage is a little more specific as to what he's talking about. Nobody knows anything. Not one person in the entire motion picture field knows for certainty what's going to work. Every time out, it's a guess, and if you're lucky, an educated one. But also, for real, nobody knows anything. And when it comes to Star Wars and Disney, the anything that nobody knows is that the brand is apparently doing fine? Yeah, see, as the year and thus the active business profit and loss reporting quarter for most companies came to an actual end, and we started to hear from the two information sources that are kryptonite to YouTube, verifiable data and the opinions of people who regularly touch the grass, it came into focus that the Star Wars is dead because we personally dislike the recent movie and we're irrationally angry about girls and lightsabers contingent is much smaller by a lot than the we're enjoying most of the shows and everyone loves Baby Yoda contingent. Who would have thought? Except anyone.
I would like to see the baby.
Because, oh hey look, one of these overlong, pieced together, don't throw anything out episodes actually comes all the way together in the end, sort of. What that idiotic Fox segment and the likes of Star Wars theory are both completely delusional about is their revisionism about this specifically.
Now you have like e-girls being like, I'm such a nerd, I'm such a geek. No. You're an opportunist.
Men feel uncomfortable. Guess what? They're not going to watch it, and I'm certainly not going to be the one to pull it up.
It wasn't really all that cool to be talking about Star Wars all the time. It was more of like a hush-hush secret thing, but only amongst your friends and nerds and geeks, real geeks.
No, that's not accurate. That's fake. That didn't happen. Didn't happen at all. Whether you can take or leave this property or its fandom at this point in 2023, the idea that Star Wars was ever some small niche thing is just an absurd bullshit lie that certain people tell themselves now because they know trying to gatekeep the most mainstream thing ever would be pathetic, and that this basically is the most mainstream thing ever. Star Wars has had lines out the door of theaters from the minute it opened to now. It has been the biggest thing in pop culture for about as long as it's been a thing in pop culture. That first Christmas, they sold kids empty toy boxes with IOUs for action figures, and that was considered acceptable because that's how big it was, and people knew it was just going to be around forever. Everybody, boys, girls, men, women, dogs, cats, sentient life forms, has been to some degree between aware of and into Star Wars for as long as there's been Star Wars. It's always been a key part of mainstream pop culture. What bothers these guys guys, isn't that the Space Wizard movies change to get more mainstream. That's not possible. What's eating them is that Star Wars lives in the mainstream as well as it always has, but they don't. Not because they're real geeks or genuine nerds, but because they're genuinely unpleasant to be around. And Star Wars, like anything else, doesn't even have to pretend to need them. Which in turn probably just makes them saltier that even if they're very unhappy about this or that movie, plot turn, or whatever, Star Wars isn't really in any kind of real, tangible crisis. Just like it wasn't after the originals when baby boomers and Gen Xers were being weird about the Ewoks, which happened, by the way. Fanboys hated the Ewoks. Or after the prequels when millennials and Gen Xers again hated the Phantom Menace and were so nasty about Jar Jar it made Ahmed Best almost suicidal, which, real talk, makes me feel just horrible that I was one of the assholes who was way too harsh about that movie and that character. But at least I can say I've learned and would like to think I've grown and hopefully improved as a person since then, because clearly some guys in my general cohort didn't learn a fucking thing.
This episode was mostly inspired by Jar Jar.
It was all inspired by Jar Jar.
Yeah.
Because it had come out like, a month before this or
Yeah,
something? The
about
new
a
Star
month,
Wars?
yeah.
And we, like everyone else in the world, hated the new Star Wars so much, and we were so excited
And
for
felt
it.
betrayed, really.
Yeah. And the fact that the Jar Jar thing just made us so angry that we decided to dedicate a whole show to how stupid it was.
Miss Kennedy, some of the execs are just expressing that maybe...
Well, that maybe we should go a different route than we did with Indiana Jones.
Fuck Indiana Jones! Put a ticket in and make her name it gay!
They can go to hell.
And either way, like so many a mediocre Star Trek villain before us, just plain Data ultimately makes fools of us all. As it turns out, Mandalorian Season 3, top original streaming show of 2023. Ahsoka got in at number 9, and related, other Disney shows like Loki Season 2 and even Secret Invasion, seriously, Secret Invasion,
I don't believe you.
got in the top 10 as well. The Inside Fandom data firm, oh yeah, Fandom spun off a data firm version of itself back in September, which explains a lot, released a report saying its metric ranked Star Wars as the top multimedia brand without even any theatrical movies in a few years.
Great Odin's Raven!
In other words, declaring something over, dead, finished, in trouble, based solely on vibes, not really the best way to run this stuff. As true now as it was then, nobody knows anything. Except you, if you've been watching this show. And I hope you'll continue doing so well into this new year. I'm Bob, and that's the big picture.